The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under their apartment door like a snake entering a garden. Kurt Love found it when he returned from his morning run. The expensive cream-colored envelope stark against their worn welcome mat. No postage. Hand-delivered. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he held it to the light, noting the weight of the paper, the precise penmanship of Muriel's name on the front. His wife was still asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow, one hand curled beneath her chin. She looked peaceful. Kurt memorized that expression, knowing it might be the last time he'd see it for a while. Inside the envelope, 3 sentences in careful script. I hope married life treats you well. Prison gave me time to think about everything we had. I'll be seeing you soon. No signature. None needed. Kurt photographed the letter with his phone, then slid it back into the envelope. He'd spent 8 years cleaning up messes for people who couldn't afford mistakes, not as a cop or a bodyguard, but as something that existed in the spaces between legal and necessary. He'd retired 2 years ago, married Muriel 6 months after meeting her at a coffee shop where she worked, and built what he thought was a quiet life. He should have known quiet never lasted. When Muriel emerged from the bedroom an hour later, yawning and reaching for coffee, Kurt handed her the envelope. He watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and pure terror in under 3 seconds. How did he find me? Her voice came out broken, the mug trembling in her hands. Who is he? She sank into a chair, suddenly looking smaller. Billy McCabe. I should have told you. I should have, her breath hitched. We were together for 2 years. He paid for everything. My apartment, my car, even my mother's medical bills when she got sick. I thought he was generous. She laughed bitterly. He was buying me. Kurt sat across from her, his expression calm, hands folded. What did he go to prison for? Aggravated assault. He put a man in the hospital, someone who looked at me wrong at a restaurant. Billy smiled the whole time he broke the guy's ribs. She looked up, eyes wet. He got 7 years. I disappeared while he was awaiting trial. Changed my name, moved 3 states away, stopped using social media. I thought I was safe. He got out early. He has money. People who owe him favors. She grabbed Kurt's hand. We need to leave. Tonight. He doesn't just hurt people, Kurt. He destroys them. Their families, their jobs, everything. I've seen what he's capable of when someone takes something he thinks belongs to him. Kurt squeezed her hand gently. Tell me everything about him. Over the next 2 hours, Muriel painted a picture of Billy McCabe, heir to a commercial real estate fortune, charming on the surface, pathologically possessive underneath. He collected things: art, cars, people. He had connections to local politicians, a lawyer who specialized in making problems disappear, and a younger brother, Nelson Kramer, different fathers, same mother, who handled the family's less savory business dealings. Nelson's worse in some ways, Muriel said. Billy at least pretends to have morals. Nelson just enjoys hurting people. Kurt absorbed it all, his mind already working through angles and possibilities. The man Billy assaulted. What happened to him? Edgar Bridges. He was a waiter. Billy's lawyer buried him in medical debt and legal fees until Edgar just gave up. Last I heard, he left town. She studied Kurt's face. You're too calm. Why aren't you scared? I am scared, Kurt said honestly. But fear's just information. It tells you what matters. He stood, pulling her into his arms. What matters is keeping you safe. I need you to trust me. We should run. Running won't stop him. You already tried that. He tilted her chin up. But I can stop him. I need you to trust me, he repeated. She wanted to believe him. Kurt could see it in her eyes, the desperate hope that someone could finally stand between her and the nightmare. She nodded slowly. The second letter arrived 3 days later, this time with a photograph. Muriel at the grocery store, taken from a distance. The message, you look happy. I'm glad. Kurt had been expecting it. He'd spent those 3 days making calls to old contacts, people who understood that some problems required unconventional solutions. He'd also been watching. The man tailing Muriel was sloppy, sitting in a black Mercedes 3 cars behind her, wearing expensive sunglasses even on cloudy days. Not Billy himself. Probably someone from Nelson's crew. That evening, Kurt drove Muriel to her mother's house 2 hours away, explaining she needed to stay there for a week or 2. Mrs. Cole, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, asked no questions when she saw her daughter's face. Keep her inside. Kurt told her quietly at the door. Don't answer for anyone you don't know. What are you going to do? Mrs. Cole asked. Solve a problem. Back at the apartment, Kurt opened his laptop and accessed files he'd sworn he'd never touch again. Before meeting Muriel, he'd worked for a private firm that specialized in extraction and elimination, corporate espionage taken to its logical, brutal conclusion. He'd been good at it. Too good. The work had been eating him alive when he walked away. But he'd kept the skills. And more importantly, he'd kept the network. By midnight, he had a complete dossier on Billy McCabe. The man had indeed been released early, 8 months ago, and had spent that time rebuilding his empire. He owned 12 commercial properties across 3 cities, had investments in tech startups, and maintained a penthouse downtown. His lawyer, Harry Connor, had a reputation for aggressive tactics and flexible ethics. Nelson Kramer ran a private security firm that everyone knew was just organized muscle for hire. Kurt also found Edgar Bridges, still in the city, working 2 jobs to pay off debt, living in a rundown apartment near the docks. And there were others, a former business partner Billy had destroyed, an ex-girlfriend who'd taken out a restraining order before mysteriously dropping it. Billy McCabe was a pattern. He crushed people who defied him, rewarded loyalty, and never forgot a slight. The 3rd letter came with a phone number and a time. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Call me. Let's talk like adults. Kurt made the call exactly on time, using a burner phone. Kurt loved. Billy's voice was smooth, educated, the tone of someone used to being obeyed. I've been learning about you. Married my Muriel 6 months ago. Former military, or that's what your minimal paper trail suggests. Living quite beneath her means in that little apartment. She's not yours, Kurt said simply. Billy laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Is that right? Did she tell you who paid for her mother's cancer treatment? Who gave her a life when she was working 3 jobs and barely surviving? I invested in her. She owes me. She owes you nothing. You went to prison. She moved on. I went to prison protecting what was mine. And I always collect on my investments, Kurt. Always. The pleasantness in Billy's voice took on an edge. Here's what's going to happen. Muriel comes back to me. You sign whatever divorce papers my lawyer provides, and you walk away. I'll even be generous. $50,000 for your trouble. You disappear, and we all move forward. No. Silence stretched between them. When Billy spoke again, the mask was gone. Then I'll bury you. I'll destroy everything you have, everyone you love. I'll make you watch as I take it all apart, piece by piece. And then I'll take Muriel anyway. Do you understand me? I understand you think you're dangerous, Kurt said. You're not. You're just rich and mean. There's a difference. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Billy McCabe, born 1985, only child from your father's 2nd marriage. Nelson Kramer, half-brother, handles your enforcement. Harry Connor, your lawyer. You own properties through shell companies. You've bribed at least 3 city council members, and you think money makes you untouchable. Kurt's voice remained level. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is whether you know who I am. He hung up. 30 minutes later, his phone rang. A different number. This time, a rougher voice. This is Nelson. My brother's trying to be civilized. I'm not. Back off, or I'll put you in the ground. Come try, Kurt said, and disconnected. He knew what would come next. Men like Billy and Nelson couldn't tolerate defiance. They'd escalate, try to intimidate, then move to violence. Kurt was counting on it. The next morning, he visited Edgar Bridges at the warehouse where he worked a shift. Edgar was thin, worn down, with the look of someone who'd stopped fighting back. I need to know everything about Billy McCabe, Kurt said. Everything that happened to you. Edgar studied him with tired eyes. Who are you? Someone who can make him pay. But I need your help. Slowly, Edgar began to talk. He described the assault. How Billy had beaten him methodically, scientifically, never striking the face so the damage wouldn't show in photographs. How Harry Connor had then sued Edgar for defamation when he tried to press charges, drowning him in legal fees. How Nelson's people had ensured he couldn't keep a job, spreading rumors to every employer. He broke me because I smiled at his girlfriend, Edgar said quietly. I wasn't even flirting. I was just doing my job, being polite. And he destroyed my entire life over it. Would you testify against him? If there was a way to make it stick? He'd kill me. His lawyer would shred me. They have too much power. Kurt leaned forward. What if I told you there's no such thing as too much power? just people who haven't found the right pressure point yet. Over the next week, Kurt put his plan into motion. He couldn't go to the police. Billy had too many connections, too many people on his payroll. Legal routes would take years and likely fail. So Kurt did what he'd always done. He identified the structure and found its weakest point. Billy's power came from three sources: money, fear, and information control. Take away any one of them, and the structure wobbled. Take away all three, and it collapsed. Kurt started with Nelson. The younger Kramer brother was Billy's enforcer, but he was also arrogant and sloppy. Kurt followed him for 3 days, documenting meetings with known criminals, photographing drug exchanges in parking lots, recording conversations about fixing zoning disputes through violence. Nelson thought his brother's money made him immune to consequences. Kurt was about to teach him differently. He sent the evidence to 3 people: a federal prosecutor who'd been trying to build a case against organized crime in the city, a journalist at the major newspaper who specialized in corruption, and Billy himself, with a simple note: "Your brother is under investigation. Time to make a choice." The next morning, Nelson Kramer was arrested in a coordinated raid. The evidence was overwhelming. Billy's lawyer tried to contain it, but the journalist had already published the story, complete with photographs and recordings. Billy had to make a choice: protect his brother and face scrutiny himself, or cut Nelson loose to save his own empire. He chose himself. Within 48 hours, Harry Connor publicly announced Billy was cooperating with authorities and had no knowledge of his brother's activities. Kurt smiled when he read that. He'd just taught Billy what betrayal felt like. But that was only the first move. The real trap was still being set. Kurt reached out to 3 of Billy's former victims: Edgar Bridges, a business partner named Tony Little who'd been forced out of a profitable venture, and a woman named Rosa O'Donnell who'd once filed a restraining order against Billy. He brought them together in a quiet meeting room and presented his plan. "Billy McCabe thinks he's untouchable because he's always fought people individually," Kurt explained. "He isolates his targets, overwhelms them with resources, breaks them down one at a time. But he's never faced multiple coordinated threats at once." "What are you proposing?" Tony Little asked. "A civil lawsuit. All 3 of you, represented by the same legal team. I'll fund it. I have resources Billy doesn't know about. We'll tie up his assets and litigation, force him to defend on multiple fronts, and most importantly, create a public record of his pattern of behavior." "His lawyer will crush us," Rosa said. "Harry Connor is good, but he's also expensive and spread thin. With Nelson's arrest, Billy's having to defend on criminal association charges too. We're going to bleed him dry." Kurt pulled out a folder. "I've also been building a case to report him to the IRS. His shell companies aren't as clean as he thinks. Tax evasion charges take time, but they're hard to fight." Edgar leaned back, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "You're not just fighting him. You're dismantling him." "Piece by piece," Kurt confirmed. The coordinated lawsuit hit Billy 3 days later. 3 separate complaints, all filed simultaneously, each alleging assault, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The local news picked up the story: wealthy developer Billy McCabe facing multiple accusations, his brother already in federal custody. Billy called Kurt that night, his smooth voice replaced with barely controlled rage. "You're making a mistake. I still have resources. I still have reach." "You had resources," Kurt corrected. "Now you're hemorrhaging money on legal defense while your assets are frozen. Your reputation's shot. Your brother's facing federal charges, and you've publicly abandoned him. How many of your loyal people do you think will stay loyal when they realize you'll throw them under the bus to save yourself? I'll come for you directly. You and that bitch." "No, you won't." Kurt's voice went cold. "Because the moment you try, I release everything else I have. Videos of you bribing city officials. Testimony from women you've assaulted who were too scared to come forward. Evidence that you've been laundering money through your real estate holdings. I've spent 2 weeks building a case that will send you to prison for 20 years. The only reason I haven't released it is because I'm giving you a choice." Silence. "You walk away," Kurt continued. "Completely. You sell your properties, you leave this city, and you never contact Muriel again. In exchange, I don't destroy you. I'll even call off the civil suits. You get to keep your freedom and what's left of your money. But your time terrorizing people is over." "You can't enforce that." "I can. Because unlike you, I don't need lawyers or muscle. I just need to push a button and your entire life ends. The federal prosecutor has my evidence in a sealed envelope. The journalist has a follow-up story ready to publish. And I have 12 more victims willing to testify if you force this to trial. Kurt paused. You spent 7 years in prison for assault. Want to spend 20 more for everything else? Billy's breathing was harsh on the line. Kurt could almost hear the calculation happening. Pride versus survival. You have 48 hours, Kurt said, and hung up. The next 2 days were the longest of Kurt's life. He stayed armed, alert, waiting for Billy to make a desperate move. But Billy McCabe hadn't built an empire by being stupid. He'd built it by being ruthless and practical. On the morning of the deadline, Harry Connor called. My client agrees to your terms. He'll be liquidating his properties and relocating. The harassment will cease immediately. Put it in writing. Signed affidavit that he'll have no further contact with Muriel Cole or her family. Violation means all evidence gets released. Done. Kurt had the document within 3 hours. He verified the signature, then filed it with his lawyer and a copy with the federal prosecutor. It wasn't perfect. Billy could still try something from a distance, but it was the best outcome without resorting to the kind of finality Kurt had left behind. He called Muriel. Come home. When she arrived 2 days later, Kurt showed her everything. The lawsuit, Billy's agreement, the evidence he'd gathered. She cried as she read it, not from fear this time, but from relief. How did you do this? She asked. How did you make him go away? I showed him he wasn't the most dangerous person in the room, Kurt said simply. Men like Billy are used to being predators. They don't know what to do when something higher on the food chain comes along. She looked at him with new eyes. What did you do before you met me? Really? Things I'm not proud of. Things that needed doing. He took her hand. I wanted to leave that life behind. I still do. But I won't let people hurt you. Not ever. What if he comes back? He won't. I made sure he knows the cost. And more importantly, I made sure he knows I'll always be watching. Men like Billy are cowards at heart. They only pick fights they know they can win. 6 months later, Kurt received a brief message from his contact at the federal prosecutor's office. Billy McCabe had sold his properties at a loss and moved to another state. Nelson Kramer had been sentenced to 8 years. Harry Connor had been disbarred for ethics violations after an investigation into his dealings. Edgar Bridges had received a settlement that cleared his debts. Tony Little had gotten his business back. Rosa O'Donnell finally felt safe. The problem was solved. The monster was gone. Kurt stood on their apartment balcony, watching the sunset, Muriel beside him with her hand in his. She'd stopped looking over her shoulder. The fear had drained from her eyes, replaced by peace. Thank you, she said quietly. You don't need to thank me. I just did what needed to be done. Not just for stopping him, for being the kind of man who could stop him without becoming him. She leaned against his shoulder. You could have killed him. I know you could have. But you didn't. Kurt was silent for a moment. She was right. He'd considered it. It would have been cleaner, simpler. But it also would have meant returning to the person he'd been, the one who solved problems with finality instead of strategy. He'd worked too hard to leave that behind. Billy McCabe isn't worth becoming a killer again, he said finally. He's just a small, mean man who needed to be taught a lesson. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't taking a life. It's choosing not to when you have the power. They stood together as the sun disappeared behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, Billy McCabe was learning to live as just another rich man, stripped of his power to terrorize. His victims were healing. Justice, imperfect but real, had been served. And Kurt Love had protected what mattered without losing himself in the process. The letters never came again.